Back to another podcast of Heal Without Harm. If you're taking your health seriously and looking for answers, this podcast will be for you. Today, we have a special guest. Her name is Brooke Siem. She's the winner of the show Chopped, chef to numerous professional athletes, author, and an advocate for deprescribing from psychiatric drugs or antidepressants in specific. This podcast is not medical advice. It's merely information around Brooke's experiences with the medical system and what you can learn from this, and hopefully helping you advocate for numerous medical opinions before making any major decisions. You may have seen her on Good Morning America, New York Post, Washington Post, or maybe even found her on Instagram Reels or TikTok. That's how I found her. Brooke, I found you on TikTok, and honestly, I knew instantly that I needed to bring you on because your story resonated with me, and I knew it resonated with many, many others. You've experienced all the medical system has to offer, which it seems like probably more negative than positives. And in your experience, it seems like drugs, the quick answer that often isn't the right one, is the one that you were dealt. Unfortunately, paid a hefty price for it. But with all that said, you've documented your journey better than I could ever imagine someone doing, and all the repercussions from that initial prescription. Brooke, welcome to the podcast, Heal Without Harm. And I appreciate you immediately saying yes to this. And hopefully all of the listeners that I've accumulated can get infinite benefit from this. And so I want to jump right into it because I already know we're not going to have enough time to cover all the things that I'd like to hit. And so starting with your, just the personal journey that started all of this, ultimately, you were prescribed antidepressants at 15 following your father's sudden death. And I want you to share, if you could, just how this early intervention shaped the understanding you have around mental health. And then I think where it really goes deep is what personal identity did you get from that?
Well, when I was first put on, it was a cocktail of psych drugs. It was 2 antidepressants. And then within a year, I was on 4 other drugs that were for random physical ailments that had popped up. And at the time, nobody connected that the antidepressants were causing these other issues, which again, in retrospect, is very frustrating because it's literally side effects listed on the label. But because our system is so siloed and nobody talks to each other, that when I was put on Effexor XR and Wellbutrin XL when I was 15, and 6 months later, I was in the endocrinologist's office, the endocrinologist wasn't looking at my thyroid test saying, oh, maybe it's the antidepressants. She just said, your thyroid's low, here's some Synthroid. And the same thing happened with the gastroenterologist and dermatologist. And that would sort of continue for the next 15 years. So nobody ever put anything together. At the time, I didn't realize that actually the onus was really on me to put 2 and 2 together on this, but it would take me another 15, 20 years to realize that. When I was medicated, it was 2001. We had dial-up internet. The world was very different. There was no social media. So there was also a level of trust that was very much still given to doctors blindly, both by my mother and by me. And at that point, depression and God, nobody even suggested that what I was experiencing was grief and not depression, but it was very much explained away by a biological background. It was that I had a chemical imbalance. There was something wrong with my brain. It wasn't my fault. All these very soft words try and protect you. And that has a big impact, I think, on anyone who's suffering, but especially as a 15-year-old, when your whole point of being 15 is to root around the world and figure out who you are and what your identity is. And it was I walked in and somebody told me, they effectively said, you are broken. You cannot do this without medical intervention. You will need this the rest of your life. Don't even try for things to be better or to fix yourself, because you can't fix it, because it's like diabetes. It's just something you have. Here's the pill. It's not your fault. Come back if there's a problem. Oh, you can stay on it forever. There are no side effects. There'll be no issue getting off, but why would you want to get off? And good luck. And I was 15, and, my mother at that point was just following the party line. By the time all the drugs that I'd been put on dosages got fixed and everything, that took a couple of years. And then on the next thing you know, I'm 18. I'm in charge of my own medical history. I go to college, and just nobody's questioning it. And that's just the way it ended up. I hear a lot of stories from people who basically become professional psychiatric patients. They get passed around from doctor to doctor, maybe institution to institution, drug to drug. That was not what happened to me. Mine was very set it and forget it. It was kind of oh, you're not having any issues, then you're fine. Don't come back unless you have a problem. But the part of that. That's a big problem, is that I was 15 when I was medicated. So I was changing anyway. This was puberty. This was huge life changes. So I just developed into who I thought I was supposed to be, which was a person who was depressed and didn't have any motivation, didn't want to do anything, cynical, sarcastic, just kind of like a little Eeyore dark cloud to be around. And I just thought that's who I was. It never dawned on anyone, including me, that the antidepressants and the message that was given to me might actually have been the root of that person who developed.
You did a good job. There's 2 or 3 like quotes from the book that you touched on there that I'd like to go back and kind of dive into, because it's interwoven so like casually. And my experience, right? I'm a physical therapist, so I treat people physically, and these messages are so, I think subliminal is the right word. Where one of the quotes, I had a screenshot on my phone, so I can't pull it up currently. But one of them said, like, every pill bottle I open, it tells me like I am broken, I need fixing. And then there was like one other, but
I am depressed.
yes, and it's like, so again, subliminal, powerful messaging that it's like, I am not whole unless I take this. Like, because I need this, I have something missing. And it, to me, it instills so much, like, it makes you feel victim to something, or it makes you feel incapable, or it makes you feel all these ways. And people don't grasp, like, especially I think from the medical side of things, like how much you're changing this person's identity with your words or with your actions or with your script. And it's so, it's just frustrating, because I swear I see it in real time. And what else kills me is like people with the experience you've had where you disagree, or have had like frustrations with that. People will come to my office with a story similar to yours, but in a physical manner. And it's like, I have to do so much work to like undo those things, because like they have now been like nailed to the wall inside their brain of like, no, the doctor said I am bone on bone for you.
Yeah.
I am depressed. Like, no, this is me. Like, this is unchangeable. I need this to fix me. And it's like so hard to unwork that, where hopefully like at this point in time, you feel more empowered and you're like, no, I can do these things to help myself, and this is part of the human experience and all that kind of stuff. But can you talk to how, if you were able to, how you were able to completely or mostly come out of that and be like, no, I'm not broken and depressed and I don't need this pill. This was part of an experience that could have been dealt with differently. Like, how did you go from feeling the identity of I'm broken and depressed to where you are now, I guess is what I'm asking.
That shift didn't start until I was pulled off my Effexor cold turkey by a psychiatrist. So I was on 37.5 milligrams of Effexor XR, and I had been for 15 years. So I from 15 to 30. And I got this kind of bizarre opportunity to travel around the world for a year. And also I was arguably I was more depressed and more suicidal after 15 years on antidepressants than I ever was in the early days. And so there was some math that just started to go through my head where I said, this doesn't make sense. This literally doesn't add up. I've been on over 10,000 antidepressants in my life. I literally calculated the number of capsules I'd taken.
I enjoyed that aspect about your book, by the way.
Yeah, I'd calculated the number of capsules I'd taken, and I was like, if these things were working as advertised, we shouldn't be going in the wrong direction. So something is not working here. And I, at the time, just thought I needed that maybe these particular drugs had just stopped working, there'd been some sort of new technology or something that had developed in 15 years, and I just needed a new drug, right? That was my thought. But then there was also this part of me that was kind of like, okay, maybe we should figure out what my baseline is without them before we go to the new drug, because I haven't had a single unmedicated moment as an adult. So I didn't understand that how impactful that thought was at the time. I just thought I needed to understand like how depressed and suicidal and what type of it would be so we could make a good pharmaceutical choice, is kind of how I thought of it. But then what happened is when she pulled me off the Effexor, because she was a horrible doctor. She didn't taper me. She's just absolutely horrific doctor. And as all of mine were, really, in my experience, I was not blessed with any good medical professionals. And I know that that's not an absolute statement that they're all shit, but mine were. And
When the majority is that high, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, I was like 5 out of 5. Crap. So, but when I got pulled off the Effexor and I went into pretty severe withdrawal pretty quickly, my type of withdrawal manifested in a way where both extremes got very obvious. And so on the one hand, I had just very, very difficult psychological, emotional, and physical withdrawal symptoms and full sensory like withdrawal symptoms that were unlike anything I had ever experienced before in intensity and what's called negativity. It's just like how bad everything was. But I also had that experience on the other side, which is where, color for me got more intense. And I realized one day that I was kind of laughing at something and I really felt the laughter. And I remember smelling a cup of coffee and just really being aware of the smell. And it was just sort of this awareness of the depth of feeling and experience that I realized I had not been experiencing over the 15 years I was medicated. And that's sort of one that really pissed me off because I was very aware that I had not been fully in my body in any way for 15 years, never once as an adult. And that was a choice that was made for me. So that made me angry. But then also, when I would have these little moments, and in the withdrawal community, we call them windows and waves. So the waves are when the withdrawal symptoms are bad. And it's kind of like putting a blindfold on. You have no ability to see that things can get better in a bad wave. But when you have a window, it's this little glimpse into who you are without these drugs and who you can be. And for me, I just kind of had this thought where it was like, oh, if I can have literally a second, like 1 second in time where I don't feel like I'm in this withdrawal period and I can experience the beauty of a flower, it means my brain is not permanently broken. So therefore, I can have 2 seconds eventually, and then 3 and 4, and then a minute and an hour and a day and a week and so on. And for me, that was just this little handhold where I started paying attention to these little windows just ever so slightly expanding. And that's when I knew that I was capable of healing and that this didn't have to be permanent. I was also completely ignorant on withdrawal. I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't know that this was actually quite common as opposed to rare. I didn't have any of the education that I have now. But that ignorance, I think, worked in my favor a little bit because I just sort of followed this blind hope of reaching from one handhold to the next, whether or not that was a moment with a friend or a little flower or just feeling alive in a good way for the first time.
Yeah. So on that note, I think I actually want to go back to if you're okay with it, I want to go back to you at 15. Going through grief, like you said, it's grief, it's not depression. And grief is normal and that it should happen. And like we have to go through that period when we lose a loved one, especially someone as important to you as your father. And I think intermixed with that, again, this is me coming from my like physical therapist aspect and learning more about the physiological things. One of them being a lot of the ladies we treat are going through menopause or coming around menopause, which is like the second puberty for women, right? Where hormones are changing so dramatically that there's sometimes you're not in control of your emotions. And so when I'm thinking about you,
they're all being offered SSRIs on the side.
I know that's what kills me. It's like the one size fits all, but does nothing but hurt. It just destroys me from the inside out, you know? And so it's like at 15, you're supposed to like cry all the time, like, and like have these emotional waves aside from losing your father. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm curious if you could look back with what you know now, what is the better path at that stage? Given that you could have information to whatever resource you had, and the doctors did have at least some sort of competency. How would you rework that back then at 15? Like going through those stages, like is it just reaching out to a friend more often? Is it creating a friend group? Is it just leaning on your mother more? Like what would be a smoother process back then with the information you have now?
Well, okay, so you have to remember that I was a minor at the time, so I wasn't.
True. I'm saying like if you were providing advice to someone, maybe.
Yeah, no, but that's important. This is an important
Yeah.
part. So really, your answer has a lot more to do with the parent than it does to do with the kid. And my mom and I have we've done some work together around this topic, and she openly admits now. She says that I didn't put I didn't put my kid on psych drugs because I thought it would help you. I put you on them because I thought it would help me. Like that's what it boiled down to is my
Okay.
mother was suddenly a single parent and we don't have an extensive family or any real family support. And she was worried that she was going to lose me because in the grief, I was also a very serious ballet dancer. So I started managing the situation through forms of control, through eating, and I was very stoic. I retreated. I kind of went to I was in shock. It's like my father died suddenly and in a pretty horrible way. So it was very much it's been like diagnosed with PTSD type reaction, right? So kind of a shell shock type thing. And so I wasn't the same person. I wasn't reacting in this way that people thought I should be. I wasn't really outwardly grieving, but I was kind of showing, control issues around food and whatnot. And my mother was just afraid that I was going to develop a fatal case of anorexia. That's basically what it was. And so when she was talking to her friends about that, their suggestion was, oh, she needs to go see a psychologist or psychiatrist and get her on drugs. And like, you prevent that by intervening now. And that's a lot of the narrative that we give around parents. It's like, if you don't act, your child could die. And what they mean is, if you don't act, your child's going to kill themselves. And look, like that may happen. And it's such a small chance of that, though, which we really need to understand. Like, I think the amount of intervention and the severity of intervention that we're doing with kids right now far outweighs the likelihood that they are actually going to successfully kill themselves. Like, it's just, yeah, and also, youth suicides are on the rise. And also, oh, guess what? What increases suicidality in children? SSRIs and psych drugs. So it's like, this is all super tangled together, and the solution is the problem, and the problem is not the solution. Is kind of what's happening. But at the time, to go back to your original question, like, what my mom and I have kind of landed on, in that what would have been the better option was, one, I just needed time. Like, being a teenager is hard. Let's not gloss over that. And I'm sure it's gotten harder with social media, and therefore the parenting around it has gotten more difficult. But parents need to sit with their own uncomfortability in the situation, let their kids struggle, and teach them how to pull themselves out of it. Like, are there lines that we need to maybe be aware of there? Yes, but are most kids hitting that line before we're throwing a bunch of powerful psychotropic drugs at them? No. Okay. But it's the parents. The parents need to feel better. They need to feel like they're supported. And that's the thing. They're not getting help for themselves. So, like, what if instead my mom had gotten help for her around the fear she had of potentially losing me, and help for her grief and for her business and all the things that were happening? What if instead of sending me back to school immediately and saying, okay, well, your dad just died, you still got to take the SAT, you still got to find a date to prom, you still got to think about going to college, we had just said, hey, this next year, we're just floating. If you want to take a day off from school, whatever. If you end up repeating sophomore year, whatever. If you don't go to college right away and maybe take a gap year instead, who cares? Whatever, right? Like, there was this idea and this narrative, and I think I've heard of, millennials, we talked about how this was kind of the narrative on us. That's like, you have to go to college to be successful and you can do anything you want and all these things. That never stopped for me. And I think now we're realizing that that was a bit of an overcorrection, and that, yeah, maybe not everybody needs to spend $250,000 to go get a generic history degree from a bougie liberal arts school in Vermont like I did, right? Like, that has served me no purpose in life. But I think if we had just taken a much more fluid, like, okay, something bad happened, we're going to figure this out together. Like, what do you need? Let's give you time. And maybe not everything's going to be derailed by this. We would have ended up in a very different place. Now, all that to say, though, is that I was also 15. I wasn't particularly interested in talking to my mother about my feelings. I didn't like the spotlight on me and everybody knowing that I had gone through this tragedy and asking, oh, how are you? Like, I hated all that stuff. So there was an aspect of me that just wanted to be like, leave me alone. Let me go back to school and, like, let's move through this. But the thing is that nobody recognized that that was part of the grieving and processing process for me. Instead, it was like, oh, she's not crying all the time, we're worried, let's medicate it. And so I think just some time. That's the biggest thing. Time and perspective and loosening the edges of what I was supposed to be doing and feeling and experiencing, I think would have gone a long way. And my mom getting help for herself so she could not make a choice out of fear, which is what most parents do.
Absolutely. And it's hard because, like you said, she instantly became a single parent, but was also grieving her spouse, and it's so challenging in that aspect, especially like I'm a father of two now, and life changes when you become a parent and you live so much on the shoulds of life. Here's what I should be doing for my kid. And you think you know it, but unfortunately I saw this video talking about how like parenting now is harder than it ever was, which I don't agree or disagree. But their argument under that was the fact that it used to be you raised your kid the best you could, and really the only thing you knew about other parents were the ones you talked to. But now there's all these different influencers like, you should be doing this, you should not be doing that. And so like now it's like, okay, what's right and wrong? And we end up living around these shoulds. And that's where I think, going back to your mom, like it seemed like she was doing what she thought she should do, and she was suggesting what she thought you should do, which really sometimes unfortunately navigates down bad paths. And then you expect the doctor to have your best best intentions for you, but then you start to learn that they're low-key corrupt, and they only learned about that medication by the drug rep who sold it to them. And then you're like, well, now what do I do? And then you go into all those things. And so that's why I think what you've done so far and what you're doing now and what I'm trying to do with you and help push forward is advocacy. Because if you and I can get messages out, then parents like your mom in that situation, when trying to research like, hey, like what should I do here, what's beneficial, it could hopefully help arm them with more information on how to, like you said, just sit with you, just be with you, or find a friend who could be with you, find someone who could connect with you during that time. There was a gentleman named John Deloney, I think he's a pastor, and he talked about when someone goes through grief, whether it's a loss of a loved one or something else, maybe it's just a breakup that was still very significant to them, like they just want you to be there, just be there whenever they need something, as opposed to like trying to fix it, trying to speed it along, trying to quote get over it. But your dad deserved the tears that you that and the grief that you are going through. He deserved that because he was a prominent person in your life that suddenly wasn't there. And so like that deserves, to me, like significant grief to go through, because like that's paying respect to who he was for you. At least that's from my perspective. And so my next question was going to be like, where does the healthcare system fall short in prescribing and then deprescribing psychiatric medication? But I think we've covered that a bit. Another one that I noticed, and this is where I feel like when people go into the medical system, get frustrated with what they're given or not given, they start looking into more woo-woo-ish type ways, right? You start like, all right, I'm going to expand this out from just Western medicine. I'm going to try to find somebody else that can help. And for someone, that seemed like it was this gentleman named Alan for you. And I don't even know if I really grasped or remember, like, what was he? Who was he? Did he have credentials? Like, I don't care whether he did or not, but like, who was this person in regards of like how he was supposed to help? And then what was your journey with him talking you through some things legitimately just over the phone?
Mm-hmm. Oh, so Alan was, I guess, what I would call a spiritual counselor. I can't remember if he had any formal credentials. He didn't have an MD or a PhD, nothing like that. He had some maybe certifications in certain modalities, but he was kind of the creator of this specific modality that I used called Compassion Key. And I mean, honestly, like, there's no easy way for me to say this. The more letters someone has after their name at this point, the more skeptical I am.
Undoubtedly.
Like,
Especially, I'm sorry, but especially when I've been through those courses, it's like literally it was just a weekend course. I mean, sometimes they're like a year long, don't get me wrong, but it's just like more and more information. And then I feel like all I know at the end of some of the certifications and like degrees I've got, I get to the end, I'm like, all you did was teach me how much I don't know. And then at the end, it's like, what do I do with this? And they're like, oh, no, we just taught you how to diagnose. It's like, no, how do I treat? Like, how do I do something about this? So I
memorize and like basically pick symptoms off a Chinese menu and say like, oh, well, this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And then doctors get pissing with me all the time when I say this stuff. But it's like, look, I almost married a PhD. So I was very in environmental politics. I was deeply, deeply entrenched in the social and corrupt, nepotistic nepotistic, is that a word? Nepotism of academia as a bystander. And I was shocked just to see the level of petty infighting and sabotage and myopic views that these people had. They were so knowledgeable vertically in what they had learned.
Siloed,
but it's like
right?
it's like I would look at some of them and be like, how are you alive? Like, you can't even cross the street and go to the grocery store. Like, and make it and do it easily without chaos, but you can talk to me all day long about the history of fisheries in Fiji, you know? And I just realized that, like, when you spend that much time in a silo and you've been taught by an institution, you're, especially from such a young age, right? Like, most people who are doctors go straight from undergrad into med school and so on. They don't typically go out into the world and, be a carpentry apprentice for 6 months and learn something else first, right? Just like my mind was so warped by these mental health diagnoses and the information I had been given at a young age. This is what happens to our doctors and our academics and our professors, right? And so it's not that their education in it of itself is bad or that people shouldn't do that. It's that it's incomplete.
Yeah.
They're not getting the knowledge that comes from lived experience. I mean, the amount of if you ask your psychiatrist if they've spent any time on the drugs they prescribe, most of them are going to say no, right? And then they're busy being the expert in what it's like to be on them, what it's like to get off of them, the side effects you have to deal with, but they have no actual functional experience. It would be like asking someone who's never had a drop to drink to get someone through the experience of having alcohol dependence. And it's like, you just can't fully get there. And it's like, it's not that, I don't want every oncologist to have cancer, but if one has, they're going to have a very different experience of treating cancer than if they haven't, right? And it's like, we just need to realize that what these professionals, the information they have is academic, it's changing, it's influenced by the scientific community being influenced by the pharmaceutical companies and journals not wanting to publish negative studies anymore. So it's publication bias. There's all sorts of reasons why when you sit down to a 15-minute appointment with a professional, you are getting the information you're getting. And I think that what we're seeing now with the internet and with people being able to share their stories is that we are wildly incomplete in our understanding of what's happening here. And far more people than I think anybody ever anticipated are getting hurt because of the way we've done this. Now, that does not mean that there is not a subset of people who don't fit exactly into the mental health or physical therapy box and will do really well following the exact protocol that is outlined in a textbook or the DSM or whatever. That's just the way scatter plots work. There are going to be people who fit really well into that, but it is not all. It's probably not most, and we need to get a lot more open and flexible about the way we treat this stuff. So when it comes to Alan and my counselor, I had already tried everybody with the letters after their name at that point. It didn't fucking work. So, like, yeah, I don't care at that point. You want to sage me and do some bowl and, like, tell me you talked to Shiva or whatnot in your sleep? I don't care. Can you help? And he could. That's what worked for me. And he wasn't that woo, but the modality, it's similar to inner family systems and a little bit of like hypnosis. And what it kind of would do is it would put me into this meditative state effectively where I was sort of able to access parts of my consciousness that I wasn't able to access just in a more formal, like, how do you feel about your mother type of environment, right? And then if a sort of metaphor or something kind of more dreamlike came up that maybe I didn't understand, there was no judgment on it. We weren't trying to figure it out or connect it. It was just like, okay, well, what are you feeling and seeing? Well, my throat is tight and I've got the image of a floating pyramid that's glowing red in my head. And it's like, we're going to work with that. And just say, okay, what are the feelings around it? Let's work with the feelings and emotions around that weird floating pyramid and take it for what it is, right? I had someone who was really resistant to all this sort of stuff before. And then same thing happened with him. He got into withdrawal and he's like, this normal shit isn't working for me. Like, what can you help with? And I said, call this person who's a compassion counselor and start working with her. And what he said to me was, he was like, all the other therapy I've tried doesn't have any soul. This has soul. And that's what it is. Like, there are so many ways people are trying to fix their soul. And yet all of this therapeutic modalities we have in the traditional academic system doesn't ever address the soul or the spirit. It's just like, again, it's back to the menu. There's no soul there. But that's where people are struggling. And we've just decided that because we can't see it, feel it, or touch it, it doesn't exist.
I think my favorite thing about what you just said is the fact that it doesn't have soul. I like, that's something that's going to change, like, honestly, my practice, just because, like you said, when it comes to PT, everybody just goes through what we call like a PT mill. Like, you show up and you do what everybody else is doing. I don't care if you're 82 or 24. I don't care if you run marathons or if you can't get out of bed. You get the same thing. And I think one thing that our clinic does well is, like, we give people hope. And I think it's because we can sit with our people, we can communicate. And I would say, like, we have soul. At least that's what I would say. And I think with the visionary type stuff, not visionary, but like the visual stuff that you talk about, where you said, go to this place, you'd go through those compassion statements and you would start to bring this stuff up. It's like, I almost called this podcast The Root Cause, because nobody digs deep. Everybody knows we should, but nobody actually walks the path with you. And I think that's where Alan did so well, meeting you where you were and trying to somewhat get to the root, whether it was visual, whether it was, like you said, down to the soul. Like, no, the way I understand this, the way I perceive this, the way this is stuck down inside of me, I need to get there before any change can take place. And it seemed like he did a great job getting there with you. And then essentially talked you through, like, potentially steps to take. But if anything, he was like a really good parent in the fact that you did it all. He just, like, aided you, guided you.
Yeah, the modality itself really, like, lends itself to that, and it's a little difficult to explain. So we'll just bypass it because I don't think it's particularly relevant. But
okay. I want to tell you a little bit about the new life hack that I just found. It's something called the Whoop Band. It's a wearable health tracker with no screen, just powerful sensors that track your sleep, recovery, strain, and even stress 24/7. I've been using it daily to see how my habits affect my body in real time. It's helped me eat better, rest smarter, shed a couple extra pounds, and stay consistent, all because the data is personal to me. Whoop is offering my listeners at Heal Without Harm an exclusive free month. Just hit the link in the show notes to try it.
I want to bring this back to more your work in the physical, because I think that'll be helpful for your audience. But I, last year on April 2nd, so it's been about 13 months now, I had a major leg injury and I completely tore my ACL, had a bunch of stuff go wrong in there. And then I had a surgery. My surgery was on May 23rd, I think. So I'm almost at the 1 year anniversary of the surgery. But we did a full ACL repair, lateral ligament repair, meniscus repair, and they did a quad autograft. And so basically I had 3 major surgeries in one day. Mm-hmm. And I've had a very complicated recovery with a complication in the recovery. We think that my quad tendon actually split. And so there's like they called it a dehiscence. It's super rare. But basically I went from being a really high level athlete and a year later I'm maybe at like 30%. So I've had a very, very abnormal recovery that does not fit into the specific physical therapy boxes. And I had to ultimately, I kept saying it was the same thing. I was shocked at how identical the situation was. Like, my physical therapist, a great guy and has a lot of success. But I remember saying about 2 or 3 months in, I was like, something's not right. Like, I know it. I feel it. I can't tell you what it is. I just know that there's something in the way I'm communicating with this leg and the way it's moving that's not right. And I kept getting told, it's still early. You're still in the acute stages. You had a major, major injury. Like, just stick with it. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, that's true, right? Again, like, I was just a patient. I don't, what do I know? I've never had
the amount of times I've heard those words, what do I know? It's like, your damn body is what you know.
Right. But I'd never been in that situation. And like, I also understand that it's like, I mean, my complication is so rare, there's not a name for it. So nobody could think to look for it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but then we just keep plodding through. I keep doing what I'm told. I keep following the things. And 6 months in, I look at him and he's like, okay, it's time to go back to the doctor.
Mhm.
I go back to the doctor. My doctor's like, structurally looks okay. And, sometimes you just don't get back to where you want to be. And I'm like, dude.
Like, what did this guy? Sorry, I'm going to start attacking him. But what did he look like? You know what I mean? Like, how unhealthy is this gentleman? And like,
No, he was actually pretty good.
Okay.
He does a lot for the U.S. ski team and stuff, which is
cool.
why
Okay, sweet. Yeah.
he's not wildly out of shape. But I was just kind of like, dude. I literally said to him, he gave me his whole spiel, which I can hear. I can hear when they go into the spiel and they're not really paying attention. And I said, no, that's not the problem. This is the problem. Feel this. Look at this, and then you can see something in his head go, huh. And then I said to him, I was like, look at me. Physically look at me. Like, I'm an athlete, right? I am not these older people on your wall who are just trying to get back to walking after a knee replacement. Like, this is different. And then I could start seeing the calculation. I could start seeing him thinking, okay, we're in the world of malpractice. I got to be careful what I say. We need to get another MRI. We need to follow all of these protocols. And I know the system well enough at this point because I was in the mental health system and now all the advocacy work. I was like, there's probably no way that I'm not going to get any compensation out of this. He didn't leave a sponge in me, right? So there's no point in suing. I've had a very rare complication. Who knows who caused it and when? It could have been spontaneous. It could have been 24 hours after surgery. It could have been caused by early PT. Could have been my fault. Like, don't know.
Mhm.
So I did all the mental math in my head and I'm like, all right, this is not the way. Like, we're not going to do another surgery. There's nothing to fix here. What needs to happen here is and I was frustrated with myself because I knew like 2 or 3 months in that we were not going down the right path of just following the check marks. But I didn't know what else to do. And then it dawned on me about 8 months in, to start doing more of the emotional somatic work with my leg in the same way that I did it with my mind and my body during withdrawal.
What was your experience there?
What?
What was your experience with that?
Well, I called up my compassion key practitioner and I said, we need to do a session and we need to do it on my leg. So the first thing I did is I found a strength and conditioning guy who's not a PT, but he knows the body. And I said, and I went to him and I was like, all right, we're going to be working one-on-one. Are you open to this? Like, are you open to me coming to you with different stuff? And he's like, absolutely. Right. And so I went into this kind of meditative state in a compassion key session and we had a full on conversation with my leg, and I'm seeing my leg like kind of felt like a little bit like I was in the Matrix. It looked like a computer and it's kind of like lifting up, and this sort of, to me, it feels like everything's on a stage, and the leg was like severed, not in a disgusting way, but more just like I was able to take it off and put it on the pedestal.
Like a model of your leg. Yeah.
And it was a model of it. And I see it as a computer and I see where it's working and I'm paying attention to like what's lighting up and where there's blocks in the flow. And I started literally asking it what it needed and then just getting quiet. And what came to me was like, at this point I was already with the new PT guy, but we were still kind of running into issues. And it said to me, you need to start doing, it was pretty clear. It was like, it said electricity. That was the word that came through. And I was like, what? Electricity? And it said yes. And then I started to unpack it a little bit. And what we needed to do, it kept saying electricity. And I forgot. I've forgotten. You need to remind me. And what I realized it was telling me is that because I had this complication in my quad tendon, my whole quad had shut down. And we couldn't do standard exercises to bring it back online because there was like a disconnected communication between my body and my leg. But it basically said, go get a STEM machine and we need you to be on STEM, but you need to be doing the exercises while we're on STEM we need to light up what needs to be working. So I get reminded what needs to be working when we're doing these exercises. And that hadn't been something that we've done. I had done STEM very early on.
Yeah.
But, when you're just like in the early days of recovery, they're like, oh, we just keep the muscle alive. But nobody had ever thought to put 2 and 2 together. And so I went out and bought one and I brought it to my strength and conditioning guy. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's start doing it. And what that did is it sort of like, it literally reminded the leg what was supposed to happen. And then it also kind of opened up the emotional connection. And then we got to really talking about it. And it was like, oh, what's happening here is my leg has shut down in the exact same way that I shut down from the emotional trauma when I was 15. And making that connection of the physical trauma and the emotional trauma, having the same reaction, only one felt like it was in my heart and the other was literally in my leg, was just this huge opening because it was like, oh, we have to, like, the leg is in shock still. For whatever reason, this is connected. So we have to treat it in the same way that we would have treated me emotionally. So we started pivoting into somatic work and like fear work and basically getting really emotional with the leg as opposed to just being like, let's do 3 sets of 10 single leg squats. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. We'll try again Wednesday, right? And it really shifted everything. And that's it took me 9 months to get to month 3 or 4 PT exercises. And now a year out, I'm kind of like doing what we were doing maybe 6 months out. And it's just been this unbelievable journey in that way. But the parallels are insane about the gaslit angles of it, not being believed, me saying something's wrong, nobody believing me, and then having to venture out on my own and pay out of pocket in order to like have a shot at being able to take a walk with my dog normally. Like, it's just so stupid.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And your story, okay, so you went back and you said my injury was like not even like labelable because of what took place. And I would say it's between rare and uncommon stories like that. I mean, I know 3 ACL surgeries right now. One of them was my coworker's brother. He, like, the incision wouldn't heal. He got an infection and like things went south. He's fine now, but like a lot of complications. Another one, ACL surgery, and months later she was still in pain. They did a cortisone injection, and a side effect of cortisone injections is a speed up of breakdown of soft tissue. Sometimes they call it necrosis. And so when you looked at this girl's knee, she had what looked like just this weird divot. And I was like, there's not even supposed to be anything in there. That's like tendon attachment. Like, there's like this much room between like skin and bone. Like, there's just a couple attachments there, but it was concave. And yeah, and so hers was a little bit lower in the knee. But the reason I tell you it's between rare and uncommon is like, they say it's rare, but it's like, I've seen too many of these for you to use that word, is what it feels like. And I tell people the ACL tear is bad, yes, but what you're actually going to be rehabbing is the surgery. Like, you're going to be rehabbing the trauma from the surgery more than anything. Now, yes, they repaired that so that it can be nice and strong afterwards, but like, that's where the complications come into place. But so many people are just willing to do the surgery because, hey, like, what do you think this is going to fix? And they're like, I don't know, surgery's going to fix it. It's like, I've witnessed surgeries. Like, they don't really do much in there. Like, they cut you open and they do some things and then sew you up. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going on a rant now, but yeah, I agree with you on the electricity thing. Like, one of my starter things, once you're far enough out, is we use dry needling, and then we'll use e-stim with the dry needling, so we can actually be in the muscle and re-stim it. And our fancy words are neuromuscular retraining. And so we have to reconnect. I tell people, like, the brain to the muscle is not working right now. We're going to bypass that. I'm going to force that muscle to contract. So like you said, reminded is a great thing. Honestly, I could almost use your description of what you figured out, what you came to, as my education piece, because that's exactly what we have to do to get it back. And it's unfortunate how many people end up losing all the stuff that they love. Like you said, as simple as walking your dog or getting back to the sports that you want. Like, if I can't walk my dog, how the hell am I getting back to there? Then you have all this emotional like challenges that come in. Then you start to lose identity, right? Of like, but I'm an athlete and now I'm not going to have that anymore. Like, wait, what happened? And then you would probably blame like what took place after that, where you talked about potentially suing, but then it's like, but was it his fault? And then all down through there. And so I'm sorry that you've went through that. And it's very frustrating that took place, but I am glad that you were able to use some of the tools that you've learned along the way to get that ball moving forward again. I want to take a step back now that we're on this physical conversation. Was there components through any of the 15 years, from 15 to 30 in regards of age, or through the withdrawal? Did exercise ever play a part in recovery or getting through withdrawal or helping with that? Was that ever a piece for you?
It's actually a bit of a inverse answer. Okay. I mean, I was a lifelong athlete and in pretty brutal sports. So ballet, like, part of the reason why I was so stoic when I was dealing with my dad's death was because I was a very serious ballet dancer, and I had been taught to smile through the pain. Your point shoes are filling with blood. Nobody cares. You're wearing a pretty tutu and a crown. Go look pretty. Like, that was my upbringing since I was 3. So for me, it was like, public displays of vulnerability. Like, what even is the point of that, right? Like, no one cares, basically. So and then I was medicated at that time, and this is something, there's part of the tricky part with psychiatric drugs is that so many of the side effects and the long-term intangible effects, like, they'll never, ever, ever, ever be able to be measured in a lab. And so you have all these people who are like, what the science says. And I'm like, it's irrelevant. Like, tell me how you are going to measure in a lab whether or not how severely someone's identity and sense of self has been changed in their perception. Like, you can't measure that. And so another one is pain. I mean, like, it's hard to measure pain, right? Like, we all have different pain sensors. And so there's actually a really interesting study with ballet dancers that was done where I can't remember if they shocked them or poked them, but dancers reported feeling pain and discomfort later than the average person. So our pain tolerance is just higher, right? Then you throw the antidepressants on top of it. The antidepressants affect your nervous system and you're effectively pain tolerant. Like, a lot of people will report sexual side effects or something called PSSD, which is post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, which is effectively a shutdown of the nerves in your genitals. Mm-hmm. So that's happening in an area where there's a lot of nerves and things are very sensitive. But again, let's not be so stupid to think that that doesn't happen anywhere else, right? Like, this is a systematic thing. So our whole nervous system, we're getting this padding that's being put around it, which is why people, quote unquote, feel better. It's not that they're feeling better or the problem has gotten better. They're just numb to it. They have covered themselves in like a full body earplug. And it makes it easier to deal with. And that's the perception, right? But if we're covered in a full body earplug, we're missing a lot of things, right? We're missing the beauty of music. We're also missing how much we hate the leaf blower outside. Maybe we shouldn't live where we live. Losing this metaphor a little bit, but it's changing the way we go through the world. Now, to bring it back to exercise, for me, and this is a hypothesis that I think for some people, again, it's not everyone. For me, I realized that once I went into withdrawal, that antidepressants had actually been on some level a performance enhancing drug for me, because my ability to go into the pain cave was very, very high. And I thought that I just had a very high pain tolerance because I was a dancer. I thought I was tough. I was sarcastic. I didn't give a shit. What is pain? Let's just get to it. Also, pain made me feel something. Whereas I wasn't feeling much. So it just took a lot to get there. And as a result, all those things combined, I was able to hit very high level places in all of my athletics. I was a nationally ranked diver in college. And then I got into CrossFit in my 20s and competed, in the top 1 or 2%. And I could just beat the shit out of my body and really go there. And I thought, again, that that's who I was. And I'm also a professional chef, which we haven't talked about. But so, I'm covered in burns and cuts, and I'm just kind of like, whatever. You've got a massive 3rd-degree burn on your arm. Who cares? Move on, right? I literally, I felt it, but it was it was there. It was annoying, but it was so easily just dismissed, and you just deal with it. But then when I got pulled off the drugs and sent into withdrawal, all of a sudden I started feeling everything, including physical pain. And I was just like, oh boy. I remember the first time I burned myself after being in withdrawal, and the pain was so searing on my arm. I was almost passed out from it. I had to sit down. It was so overwhelming. And I was like, holy shit. If this is what I'm feeling physically, again, what am I feeling emotionally that I haven't been feeling? And then all the, crap came up, and that was horrible. But in the year or so, I was in withdrawal for about 2 years. And during that time, I found it very, very difficult to get to the level of physical activity that I had before. My body was just so sensitive that, I went from, again, being this really high level CrossFit athlete to not being able to get through a workout because my nervous system would get so ramped up that I would basically start to have a panic attack in the middle of the workout just because my heart rate and breathing rate was elevated. And so I'd have to go collect myself in the bathroom, and I couldn't get to I would get to the pain cave so much more quickly that I wasn't able to hit the numbers. I wasn't able to train hard. I was just so sensitive. And that has kind of just continued in a lot of ways. That level of intensity just isn't great for me anymore. And so I do a lot more quiet stuff now, if that makes sense, like physically. But I've always been an athlete, but I don't know. People react to exercise very differently in withdrawal. Some people, if they've got akathisia or some sort of restlessness, they just run until their feet bleed. Other people are like, I can't take a walk around the block without feeling like I'm just going to fall over. So it varies a lot. But for me, I just became so sensitive that I was forced to change the way I moved into more.
I think a lot of the research that I know around exercise is more about kind of not getting to the drugs in the first place, if that makes sense, right? To where I think when I asked that question, I thought about how that would help potential depression, but I realized that it was a little bit of a poor question because your experience was being on drugs and then coming off of them. And so that's like a totally different experience, right? Than going through grief or going through depressive states aside from medication.
And I was always a lifelong athlete, right? Like
exactly. So your background is totally different, and the relationship you have with exercise also different. Yeah, that's a good point. I think what I started to like really the way you described the post. So you were saying that you would do high intensity exercise during withdrawal, and then that's when you'd have to collect yourself, and heart rate would be high. Is that correct?
Yeah, because my heart rate would go from wherever it was resting, let's say 60 beats per minute, and shoot up to 170, 180 so quickly. Like it wouldn't take very much. And then I would be so physically aware of the heavy breathing and the high heart rate and the stress on my body because, again, I didn't have the full body earplug on anymore.
Yeah.
So then I would almost panic because it was so intense. And it was so different from, the 3 months before when I was doing, 8 workouts in a weekend and I was redlining every single one of them. Suddenly I felt like I was just, walking up the stairs and redlining. And that was very weird and scary to me. And then, anyone who's ever kind of been on the verge or in a panic attack knows it's kind of this chicken and egg thing. Like the more you breathe, the worse it gets. And the more you're aware of it, the worse it gets. And it just kind of keeps going. But I think like this is where a lot of the research really, I'm not going to say it falls flat as much as it doesn't reflect a lot of what's going on in the real world with people, because we hear these studies about how exercise and dancing is more effective than antidepressants, and I think that is most likely true in populations who kind of go from nothing to something.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But also we have such a significant percentage of the population who are on antidepressants right now, and because of that our body is not doing things like, especially depending on what type of drug you're on, right? Some of them more exclusively work on the serotonin system. Some of them do multiple systems all at once. And so that drug is doing the legwork of producing the quote unquote feel good chemicals in your brain, right? And like, I never understood it. People would say like a runner's high. I'm like, I've never had a runner's high in my life. Like, what are people talking about? Like, I would hit a red line almost every single day. I would never walk out of there feeling euphoric ever. Like, I went to the gym because I had been my whole life and I wanted to fit into my pants. It wasn't about like feeling good, afterwards. I never did. And I was talking to someone about this fairly recently, and we kind of put together, again, there's no science around this, but I realized, the reason why I'm not getting this endorphin rush or didn't get this endorphin rush at the time was because I was so hopped up on psych drugs that my body was not producing its own serotonin. We had shut that down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was using this chemical crutch to do that, which meant that when I did these things that are supposed to create this endorphin rush or whatever, my body was like, we don't need to do this. Also, we can't. We don't have the capacity. So I wasn't getting that feedback. And I think that sometimes, I hear people who are like, I've been on antidepressants, I've tried exercise and all this stuff, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, that might be because we've actually intervened in the system. So it's just not, you're not able to feel that.
Well, it sounds like your solution isn't an overnight solution. Like, let's say they followed whatever advice you'd give. It's like, okay, now you're going to do this, but it's going to take like a year. And so it's like, if the advice is correct, right? And that's what's so hard with some of these things is, if you're like, you should try this. It's like, you can't try it for 2 days and expect results. It's got to be like, well, maybe it's this. And then you have to go through this long period thing.
And I think that once antidepressants get involved and we're starting to come off of them, like, what people have strayed so far from their baselines and who they are because of them. And again, it's subtle. It's a very subtle thing that happens. You start taking them because you feel bad about something. They make you feel a little better, but it takes away your ability to notice when you feel bad in general. And then you don't make adjustments to your life to avoid things or change things that don't work for you.
All
And then
your
when
feedback mechanisms are messed up.
Exactly. So then when people get to a point and they're like, I want to come off the antidepressants for a myriad of reasons, it could just be they're not working. I feel worse. I want to get pregnant. I just know more about the system. I don't like it. I'm having side effects, whatever it is. They pull off of them and then they look at their life and they're like, oh shit, everything's wrong here. And then everyone's like, just try exercise. And it's like, well, at this point, we have it's like the whole house is on fire and you're trying to give me a cup of water and say this will work, right? When what we really need is the fire truck and to start over. So that's another reason why all this stuff gets so confused, is because people are there's mismatches and there's orders in which these things were done, especially in a lab, and people were taking specific lab stuff and trying to overlay it on a person's experience. And it's like, it's not really how it works.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree. And I think one of the aha moments I had is I currently actually have a client who has been having, we'll just say, mental challenges and trying different pharmaceutical interventions. And one of the things he reported to me as of late was, I tried to do a CrossFit workout and I got halfway through and everything hurt. Everything was super intense. My heart rate was crazy. And now I'm like, I think he tried maybe 2 or 3 different ones. And so then I'm like, how much of this was just overall affected by the medications going on and off, switching them? Because you used to CrossFit 6 times a week. He used to be you before any pharmaceutical interventions came in. And now that he's tried some of these things, we've boiled down where we're debating if he has fibromyalgia, because his pain just doesn't make sense. But I mean, if his body's nervous system is interpreting these, what was normal inputs now completely differently, I mean, I could see how this slowly starts to snowball and become all these different potential interventions.
One of the biggest mistakes prescribers make right now in the world of mental health, it's not just doctors, it's fucking NPs and PAs and telehealth stuff, is when they put somebody who's never been on a psych drug on a psych drug, and that person reports that they are having side effects. Then what happens is what the doctors or the prescribers really need to do, that should be a huge canary in the coal mine. If someone starts reporting physical or any negative side effect from the short time on one drug, that should be a sign that this person may not be a candidate in any way for any drugs. Because then what they do is they switch them to another drug. And what that side effect is saying to you is that this is a sensitive person. This person may not be able to metabolize these drugs properly. There's something happening here where something is coming up immediately and saying, hey, this is a bad idea.
So and it's elevated past side effect, and it's now a reaction almost.
Yes, because
because of the response, you're like, hey, this is more of a I shouldn't take any, as opposed to oh, it's just a side effect.
I think that line is very fuzzy, but I think that this is more common than we really think, right? If you've got someone because if you think of any other, let's use an allergy as a better example, right?
Yes, that's more where I was going.
Yeah, if someone doesn't know they're allergic to peanuts and you give them peanuts and they're like, my throat feels itchy, you don't then say, let's give you an almond.
Yeah.
See if that works. You say, oh shit, you might be allergic to nuts. Maybe we should stop giving you nuts and proceed with caution. Let's go get you an allergy test, right? So at this point, in my opinion of the world of mental health, if someone comes in and they are given Zoloft or whatever it is, and they come in and they say, I've taken this for 2 weeks, I have XYZ symptoms, this doesn't feel like a good fit, the response should not be, let's try Lexapro. The response should be, we need to give you a pharmacogenetic test now to see how are you metabolizing this. We need to pull you off these drugs and see if those symptoms go away. Not let's switch you to something else. But the standard of care bullshit is we're switching to something else. And what happens is people are ignoring the canary in the coal mine, and then they start getting down this pharmacy fun house where one symptom leads to the other. They start having all these unexplained symptoms that don't seem interconnected. Nobody's connecting the dots between jumping from one drug to another. These people are also more likely to enter into withdrawal. So you could have someone who spent like 6 weeks on Zoloft, says, I can't do it, I don't like it. They get pulled off. They go into withdrawal. Their symptoms get worse. They toss them on another drug. And what you're doing is you're just continually throwing gasoline on embers and wondering why people aren't doing well when you miss the first sign that this was possibly a very bad fit. And so when I hear something like that from this patient of yours, that's where my mind goes immediately is there's something going on here that like, this is not random.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I fully agree. Brooke, I got bad news. We're already 4 minutes past. So if you're open to it, there's a couple of things I still wanted to cover. And so at some point in time, we could do a part 2, bring you on.
Right.
Because I think what we talked about, we exposed the problem, we talked about your experiences and all that, but we did not get to like, where do we go from here? And I know you've got a newsletter and you're still putting out great content. And so if you don't mind, to close this out, give us where people should go just to learn more about you, maybe gain some information about what you've learned, and then maybe some direction on some of the advocacy stuff that you're either working on or some direction from there. Where should people go after this podcast?
You can find me all over the internet at Brooke Siem. That's BROOKESIEM.com on Instagram, TikTok, all those things. And my book is available wherever books are sold. My social media is, thanks, there's the book.
Yeah.
My social media, I've been moving into, I kind of want to create an encyclopedia. I want it to be a place where if people have questions or concerns about themselves or somebody else, where if they scroll through enough of my content, they'll be able to at least recognize something they're experiencing in a way that hopefully will lead them to more information. As you said, like, I'm not a doctor and this is not medical advice, so no one should be ever stopping their psych drugs cold turkey for sure. And also, there's a lot of situations in which going to your doctor is not the right call, unfortunately. I talk about that extensively too, because you say the wrong thing to the wrong person and you will be put on an involuntary hold in a psych ward and there's nothing you can do about it. And then you lose your rights and your life changes. So unfortunately, this is not a world in which a doctor is always a safe place. And I don't want to scare people, but true informed consent is knowing the whole spectrum of treatment and choices and weighing the pros versus the cons. And we have been very bad at informing people of the cons. And so that's some of what my work is, and also just helping people who are already in this situation, like, okay, now what? Where do we go? And that's where we could talk about in part 2, because there actually are solutions here, there are strategies, and there is hope at the end of the road. For sure.
Well, Brooke, thank you. I will make sure that everything that you just listed out will be in the show notes so people can just click buttons instead of trying to remember and type things in. Like I said, the goal of my podcast is to heal without harm. And unfortunately, you went through a lot of harm, and hopefully people can heal faster based off your experience and all the information that you're putting out there now. And a hashtag that I want to start to kind of like get a ball rolling is hashtag keep asking questions. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to keep asking questions of your doctors. And if you're not liking the answers you're getting, find another one, get another opinion, and find people who can walk this path with you, like Brooke, or other people in this realm that can put you first and walk that path with you. Thank you guys very much for listening to How to Heal Without Harm. And Brooke, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We'll see ya. Bye. This episode of Heal Without Harm is brought to you by Compelled Fitness, your ultimate partner in Wichita for getting into the best shape of your life. Whether you're aiming for better health, reaching athletic goals, or simply improving your fitness, Compelled Fitness offers programs and services tailored to fit your needs. Don't settle for less than your best. Visit compelled-fitness.com today and start your transformation with expert guidance and personalized fitness. At Compelled Fitness, the goal is helping you become the best version of yourself.